Good morning. Wow. Good morning and happy spring. We made it. Sorry, Reverend Greta Joe. I am filled with this joy. So it is the first day of spring, and welcome to Fountain Street Church on this vernal equinox. We are so glad that you are with us this morning. We have a lovely service planned around the themes of peace, something I think we can all agree the world could use more of right now. This morning, I am so happy to welcome Jeremy Verweis on guitar. He is back. If you had the privilege... Oh, this is great. I love the spirit this morning. Welcome, Jeremy. He was with us on Ash Wednesday. He is a gifted musician, and we're so glad to have you with us. I'm joined by my colleague, Reverend Greta Joe, who will be leading us in worship as well today. And we have the wonderful Fountain Street Church Choir with us, who will be doing 3 songs today. I'm so grateful for that. And later, just a little sneak peek, we're going to resume, some of you may not like this at all, passing the plate again. So it is a sign of spring in a different way. So I am so glad you are all with us this morning, because no matter who you are, whether this has been your church for a lifetime or 30 years or 20 or 10 or 2 minutes, or this is your very first time, whether you are watching us from home because that's more comfortable or it feels safer for you, or you are joining us in this cathedral of love in this beautiful temple of peace, whether you believe in one God or many gods or no gods at all, or just don't know what you believe from one minute to the next, whether you live right here in Grand Rapids and up Fountain Street, which some of you do, or you are joining us from across the country or across the hemisphere, which some of you do as well. No matter who you love, no matter who you're loved by, whatever your reason for being here this morning, I hope you trust me and believe me when I say that each and every one of you is welcome here, where love, justice, and inclusion are the shared work of this ministry's faith. And so on behalf of everyone who calls this their spiritual home, please let me welcome you on this first day of spring to Fountain Street Church. We are so glad you're here.
Will you all believe me if I say happy spring? I was ordained on the spring equinox, so I can't not love it. Good morning. My name is Reverend Greta Joe. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve here as your assistant minister. Good morning. This morning's call to worship comes to us from the Reverend Sharon Weil. Hear these words as they call us into our time of worship together. As I begin, I invite you to take a deep breath with me. It is said that ministers are here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. I say we are all afflicted and we are all comfortable. May our time together this morning be a comfort and a confrontation. May we find peace in times of tumult. May we here invite tumult into lives of peace. May we here find calm in times of restlessness. May we here allow restlessness to evolve into action. Let this place you consider be a place where you consider what you've never considered. Let this be the place you imagine for yourself something new and unthinkable. May this hour bring new dreams of new ways of being into the world. Come, let us worship together. The ancient witness today comes from the Laosé. Hear what the ancient spirit is saying to our contemporary souls this morning. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. The contemporary witness this morning comes to us from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Hear what his words are saying to our spirit this morning. We will not build a peaceful world by following a negative path. It is not enough to say that we must not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and to sacrifice for it. We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war, but on the positive affirmation of peace. We must see that peace represents a sweeter music, a cosmic melody that is far superior to the discord of war. Somehow, we must transform the dynamics of the world power struggle from the negative nuclear arms race, which no one can win, to a positive contest, to harness humanity's creative genius for the purpose of making peace and prosperity a reality for all of the nations of the world. In short, we must shift the arms race into a peace race.
Every week, I've noticed, I get so excited to welcome you that I forget to introduce myself. So I'm Reverend Christopher, and I apologize for not doing that sooner. I'm Reverend Christopher Rowe. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the privilege and the honor of serving as the acting senior minister here. Welcome again. I read a little story recently, and I am a bit embarrassed to say I cannot find it, again, to cite it properly. I promise when I do, I will provide the proper citation, but it goes something like this. Long ago, as most stories begin, there was a nobleman who was also an important ingredient to those stories. And he wanted a painting of peace. He wanted someone to be commissioned to create for him the most beautiful, peaceful painting ever known to humankind. And so there was a competition. He couldn't figure out how else to get that painting, so he had an art prize of sorts, and he wanted everyone to contribute their best rendition of peace. So the day of the exhibition finally came, and there were painters from all over the land who brought their works and lined them up on golden easels with velvet drapes as to add to the allure and the spectacle. And one by one, they unveiled their work, often greeted with applause or gasps or communal adoration. As one artist revealed their work, the crowd burst into a thunderous applause as a glassy pond was displayed, so serene and realistic that you felt you could almost see your own reflection in the painting. In the next, the crowd gasped as a landscape of wildflowers blanketed a hillside, and transcendent clouds passed by overhead, casting shadows onto the mounds of leafy greens. So soft and so inviting, you feel like you could almost reach into the picture and touch their delicate lace and feel the warmth of the sun. So painting by painting had passed, each with their own illustration of serenity and stillness. And then it came time for the final painting. And so the painter removed his velvet drape, and the crowd fell silent. Slowly, eyebrows arched in disapproval, and pursed lips formed frowns. Before them was a menacing and dark, thunderous waterfall, crashing over boulders and rocks and through a handful of resilient, if not stubborn, trees. And overhead, a dark and menacing sky signaled the anxiety of an approaching storm. As the judges and the noblemen drew closer to the foreboding image, one small tree stood out in the midst of the chaos and tumult. And perched upon its only scrappy branch was a tiny bird nest. And within the chaos of the waterfall's mist and what appeared to be an approaching storm in the distance was a small bird in that nest, nesting with her eyes gently closed and her wings spread graciously and gracefully over her hatchlings. This mother, the artist tried to explain, has manifested herself as the highest peace that passes all mortal understanding. She has found the sanctuary of safety and security for her children in this tree, protected by the power of the waterfall, and has found the nurturing sanctuary of the canopy of her wings to be the most powerful way in which she could coexist with the chaos of the world around her. It's within her courage and her resolve and her imagination that I have painted peace. Peace is an uncomfortably messy reality to grasp, especially in a world like ours that so desperately needs it right now. Culturally, many of us have been indoctrinated with an understanding of peace that kind of represents the glassy pond or the silent meadow, placid and serene, null of discomfort and void of conflict and removed from the ails of the world. And in a moment in our history where it feels as though every corner of our universe and every fiber of our moral fabric is being threatened by physical and emotional and psychological and spiritual and ethical warfare, it's really easy to associate our prayers for peace and the pursuit of peace with a framing that confines peace to simply the void of those dysfunctions. It's the same framing that illustrates a world of peace as simply absent of violence, or absent of war, or absent of conflict and upheaval. But what I think needs to be underscored this morning and at this precise moment in our shared history, and what I think is understood in virtually every one of the great world's religious traditions, is that peace with a capital P, the kind of peace that passes all understanding, is so much bigger than this, and that desperately matters to us all. The kind of peace that Jesus first spoke of in his Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the peacemakers." The kind of peace that the Buddha first taught on as he explored mutual causation. The kind of peace embodied by Mahatma Gandhi as he demonstrated the Hindu understanding of peace as conflict and transformation and preservation, all as three interdependent realities. The kind of peace manifested by Lao Tse in his teachings of balanced harmony and right relationship. And the kind of peace seen in the life of Muhammad and the teachings of Islam that teach us all and call us all towards collective well-being and flourishing for all, are all types of capital P peace that isn't just null of conflict and war, but rather an embodiment of peace that's an action and a movement that's about restoring relationships and living with a sense of unity and wholeness and wellness with one another. As the great and late peace activist Nelson Mandela once said, peace is not just the absence of conflict. Peace is the creation of an environment where all can flourish regardless of race, color, creed, religion, gender, class, caste, or any other social markers of difference. Hear that again. Peace is the creation of an environment where all can flourish. True peace isn't just a ceasefire or a truce. True peace isn't just the absence of fighting and war. True peace, whether it's taking place in the city square of Kiev or squarely rooted in the center of our homes, isn't just waving a white flag in surrender to those with whom we're in conflict. True, real, authentic peace is about making things right, making things whole, and shaking up the status quo, if not dismantling it altogether, so that collective flourishing can finally be realized. In the Christian stories, the ones that I'm most familiar with, Jesus outlines his vision of a more just and equitable world through his Beatitudes. And I don't think I could talk about peace and not at least reference that powerfully familiar line from Matthew 5:9, Blessed are the peacemakers. It's a powerfully familiar passage for many of us, and yet it's so easily overlooked or at least undervalued, especially amongst evangelical Christians. In a moment where Jesus was outlining his vision for the way the world could be and should be, he could have chosen any number of realities to be a part of beloved community, but he chose peacemakers. He chose makers of peace, the ones who would do what they could, however they could, wherever they could, whenever they could, to bring right relationship to the world and collective well-being to all of the world's societies. It may be the first day of spring, but it was only a few months ago that we gathered in this very space in that crescendoing moment of Advent on Christmas Eve, in which we lifted up the powerfully disruptive story of peace, born into the world in the form of a disruptive infant refugee coming from the most marginalized of society. And here we are now in his adult ministry as he declares a new way of being the world, declaring that the most disruptive, powerful, and just way of bringing peace into our world is by making it ourselves. By making it ourselves. And that's where it gets pretty interesting, because he didn't say, blessed are the peacekeepers. It doesn't go, blessed are the peacekeepers. That's an entirely different ethos, and he could have said it if he wanted to, but he didn't because he wasn't interested or talking about peacekeeping. Peacekeeping, though it does have a place, is not what he was talking about. It is not the means to an end of a more just, equitable, and loving world, and it's certainly not the world that Jesus was talking about. Peacekeeping only satisfies the need for stillness and quiet while doing nothing to address a status quo that still allows for oppression, exploitation, marginalization, and injustice in the first place. Peacekeeping, when insisted upon by the powerful and the elite, is nothing more than another tool of spiritual bypassing and a form of spiritual and political gaslighting, because it does nothing to address the injustices that the status quo will continue to uplift. As a tool for spiritual bypassing, peacekeeping keeps the conversation safe and shallow at the dinner table or in the workplace, as a racist family member or a misogynistic colleague pontificates about the ails of our nation or the invalidity of another person's worth. As a form of gaslighting, peacekeeping makes it feel safer and makes us believe we're better off by leaving that baggage outside of the churches and the communities of faith that we call home, rather than laying down our collective lamentations and fear of what might happen if we do. And when wielded in the hands of the oppressor, peacekeeping is used to minimize conflict and yet still keep the status quo right intact, so that even the peacekeepers themselves become the beneficiaries of the injustice and inequities that rob our world, our communities, our nations, our churches, our homes, and our hearts of the everlasting peace we are seeking in the first place. To put a bow on it, and more frankly put, peacekeeping minimizes conflict, but at the expense of authentic restoration and transformation. And to revisit those words, once more of Mandela, if peace is the creation of an environment where all can flourish, it needs to be understood this morning that peacekeeping is not the modality to that end game. It won't be peacekeeping that leads us to an environment where all can flourish, which is exactly why we need to make peace ourselves. It's exactly why we need to make peace ourselves, which is why we need to be makers of peace, or peacemakers, as Jesus said to his earliest followers. If we're going to pray for peace and pray that peace begins within ourselves, then we're going to have to pray that we are also peacemakers and accept the messiness of that responsibility. And we'll also have to pray that we're going to make peace, and that making peace begins within ourselves. Peacemaking, oh boy, it's messy. And it's complicated, and it's risky business because it calls on us to the space of communal lament in Lent, as Reverend Greta Joe inspired us with last week. But then it pushes us further yet, as it insists that we harness all of our power in the communal vulnerability and humility that we share, and seek the restoration and regeneration for communal and collective well-being. Unlike peacekeeping, peacemaking cares nothing about maintaining the status quo, because, in fact, its endgame is to dismantle the status quo altogether and be a disruptive force against the unjust ways in which the world is currently turning. You remember that call from Christmas Eve where we talked about turning the world in a new direction using the disruptive forces of peace? Peacemaking is incredibly messy because it actively engages conflict as a tool for transformation. And instead of resolving or managing conflict, it seeks to coexist with conflict, like the mother bird perched on that messy, thunderous waterfall. Peacemaking espouses that there is a reason for conflict, and that reason must be engaged. And it names that the broken systems and unjust structures that oppress our neighbors need to be stopped. And then it demands that together we dismantle them so that we can rebuild a more loving and just society, as uncomfortable and unsettling as that can be. And if peacekeeping is simply the work of peacekeepers minimalizing conflict in order to keep everyone happy, then peacemakers their work is to engage conflict and forgo a false sense of happiness to ensure that all of humanity is healthy and whole and not just happy. And I'll say it again. Peacemaking is messy, difficult, and uncomfortable work. Think for a minute of the peacemakers before us and within our very midst. From Black civil rights leaders to women's rights activists, to advocates fighting for LGBTQ rights, to communities that are demanding collective well-being for all people. Peacemakers have always and will always be the ones that are doing the uncomfortable work of actively engaging conflict for the betterment of the whole, and sometimes with devastating pushback and consequences. And that's precisely the good and the bad and the good news this morning about peace. Because peace is something that we can all be makers of. And peace is truly something that can begin within ourselves. But peace is also something that takes an incredible amount of courage and commitment to make. But even in that reality, there's good news, because guess what? This is not work that we do alone. In fact, peacemaking is the kind of work that's best done in community, even with its messiness and willingness to take on conflict. And to some extent, I think that's exactly where Fountain Street Church can connect to this. It is messy work, especially in West Michigan, to take a public position in support of reproductive justice, especially when it has been met with the public's pushback and protest. You have to be okay engaging in conflict for that. It is messy work to publicly declare support and allyship with the LGBTQ community, especially in a religious landscape that uses that very support to discredit our status as a religious institution. You have to be okay engaging in conflict for that. It is messy, messy work to publicly say that Black lives matter, and to publicly demonstrate that Black lives matter, and to publicly witness through anti-racism and anti-oppression work that Black lives matter, especially in a community where racism continues to underscore so much of the status quo of our city's problems. You have to be okay engaging in conflict for that. And it is messy, messy, messy work being a cathedral church for all walks and talks of spiritual and religious life, especially in a community where there is so little religious diversity and spiritual hospitality. You have to be okay engaging in some conflict for that. But at different points and different chapters and throughout different seasons, Fountain Street Church has engaged those conflicts and has chosen to move forward and towards the call to be makers of peace and not just keepers of it, and willingly and willfully engage the conflict necessary to be makers of the peace that brings right relationship to our community. And I think that's where we find ourselves again. It's quite literally the vernal equinox, the intersection between winter and summer, and the climaxing moment between the great awakenings of spring, both outside springing up through the warm spring mud and the spring that's happening in this church. What is that shift calling us towards, friends? So I saved myself the trouble of listing all of the places in which injustice and oppression and war and violence are tearing our world apart right now. Because I know you already know it. It's impossible to ignore, and it's even more impossible not to ask ourselves, what is our connection and our responsibility to the lack of peace in those places? What is our connection and our responsibility to the lack of peace in our world and in those places? Is this church and the community that calls it home positioned to be peacekeepers or peacemakers? Are our prayers for peace in the Ukraine, or Palestine, or Myanmar, or Florida, or Texas, or 49507, or South Division Avenue, or our homes, or our hearts, simply prayers for stillness and quiet? Or are we praying for a revolution and a restoration and a regeneration of our world that not only dismantles the status quo, but also helps to start building a new one with voices and perspectives and lived experiences of everyone who is part of the shared fabric of our humanity. Is this church positioned to be peacekeepers or peacemakers, messiness and all? Like that mother bird perched in the waterfall, living in mutual relationship, so too can this church and the beloved community that calls it their home be transformed by the power of peace and peacemaking. My prayer for all of us this morning is that we come together as one church and be the cathedral of love and the temple for peacemaking that this world so desperately needs right now. So let there be peacemaking on earth. And let it begin with us. May it be so.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. That is a mighty statement that will take mighty practice. And so, as our time of prayer and meditation this morning, I'm going to invite us into a practice that is, in many ways, what most meditation, why it's called meditation practice, is at its heart. An opportunity to practice a skill, a value, a way of being in our moments of quiet, so that it is a well we can draw upon in moments of noise. In the Buddhist tradition, the practice of metta, often translated as loving kindness, or some believe more accurately as friendship, friendliness, invites us to open our hearts to compassion, to a natural capacity for love, kindness, and connection that we all have within us. It is a wish for everyone to be happy, safe, and free from suffering. So together in community, we are going to cultivate and offer this gentle support to ourselves, to others, and to the world. We do this as a way to expand and grow our own hearts so that we can hold the joy and the suffering and transform it together on our journey. This morning, we will practice metta for ourselves, for those we love, for those we struggle with, for those we do not know, and then for all beings throughout the world. Join me. Relax into a physical posture of meditation and a mental attitude of attention, whatever that looks like for you here in these seats or wherever you join. Your eyes can be closed or open and raised towards the light. But either way, bring your awareness inward. Take a deep breath in and gently breathe out. Without straining or concentrating forcefully, gently follow these instructions. After you hear each phrase, repeat it silently to yourself. May I feel safe from harm. May I feel happy. May I feel strong. May I live with ease. Now that you have offered yourself metta, loving kindness, friendliness, I invite you to think of a being you love. And repeat again these phrases to yourself, sent to them, wherever they may be. May you feel safe from harm. May you feel happy. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. Having wrapped one that you love in care and compassion, I invite you now to take a moment to think of a being with whom you have a challenging relationship. As this is a practice, do not pick your most strained relationship, just a difficult connection. Picture them in your mind's eye and then silently repeat these phrases to them. May you feel safe from harm. May you feel happy. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. Next, imagine a stranger, a being you do not know. If it helps to have that being embodied, perhaps it's a clerk at a store you went to recently, or a passing face you've seen on the news. Bring that being into your awareness and silently repeat these lines to them. May you feel safe from harm. May you feel happy. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. Now allow that loving kindness, that friendliness that you have cultivated, allow your awareness to open in all directions, to all beings, humans and animals living everywhere, living in richness, in poverty, in war and peace, in hunger and abundance. Aware of all the joys and sorrows that we experience together. And repeat silently after me. May we feel safe from harm. May we feel happy. May we feel strong. May we live with ease. Take a deep breath in. Gentle breathe out. Breathe in again. And then letting it out. Notice the state of your mind. Notice how you feel. And when you're ready, return your awareness to this moment, to this place, this time gathered together. With gratitude for the adaptation from Reverend Rebecca Coppola, may it be so. May peace be with you.
Thank you, choir. So, my little secret is I think I actually do hate spring a little bit more than winter because it's like a constant psych out all the time. It feels like 1 minute it's finally time for the flowers, and this might be the year that the leaves are going to open in April, which is not a real thing, but I tell myself that every year. And then it's cold and gloomy and rainy and stinky and muddy, and well, it's rough. And I also feel like it is such a beautiful illustration for the season we're in with COVID. I feel like we are in this dance of a back and forth and thinking things are great and then a little concerned that maybe they're not as great as we think, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what season it is just yet. And so that is a dance I opened up to you last week. We are still doing here at the church, making decisions that feel safe and responsible and ethical for all of you, as well as the folks who are not comfortable fully engaging yet. But also the dance we're trying to do is we watch things change by the day, as they often have with COVID. So with all of that said, while I will acknowledge that there are many things that we do not know yet, we are going to slowly phase things in that we do feel comfortable doing. And one such thing on this first day of spring is to resume the tradition of passing the plate. There's no measure that puts any risk with it that we're aware of, and so we are going to begin passing the plate again. It's a beautifully physically embodied way of sharing a little more of ourselves in worship. It's one of the ways we can physically participate. Even if you can't or choose not to put anything in the plate, you can still be a part of passing that love through this community, because we ultimately know that that love goes right out of these doors in 50% of our ministries here. That is our wonderful tradition, and though it has changed how much has gone out the doors, it's never changed that the value is always on the collective impact we can offer the community in that 50-50 split. And so, with that spirit in mind, and with probably a few awkward bumps here and there as we reteach ourselves how this works, the offering will now most graciously be received. Thank you. Is this working? I always feel like I need to ask. Wonderful. We have so many announcements this week that I needed some backup. All right, well, if you are looking for a way to actively pray for peace, the downtown churches here in Grand Rapids are actually hosting a service of prayer tomorrow evening that will be at 6 p.m. right next door practically at St. Mark's Church. I believe there will be some hymn singing, so if that is something you want to take into your risk factor, you might want to know that. If you want to sing hymns, then you might want to go. But either way, please know that at 6 p.m., churches and their clergy from downtown will be gathering over at St. Mark's Episcopal Church at 6 o'clock for just a prayer for Ukraine and for peace around the world, an ecumenical kind of gathering. You are warmly welcome to participate.
I have an announcement to share from our Director of Children's and Youth Programming, Lydia Stubbs. She is looking for stories that are important to you, that bring joy and a smile to your face as stories of this community. They're working on sort of a getting to know Fountain Street lesson plan for our youngest congregants and would love to feature real people and real stories. So if you have a story that you find yourself retelling that makes you giggle, that makes you smile, that you think would be age appropriate for small beings, maybe it was a great worship service, maybe it was a time you met your best friend, remember when. I invite you to reach out to Lydia. Your stories can be anonymized and all of that sort of thing, but she would love to be able to share some real life stories with the youngest among us. You can find her email in the Friday Flash or on our website, or she's over by the social hall running the youth program directly following service. Thank you.
In addition to the beautiful music that the choir produces for us every week, the choir is also producing a special piano concert this Friday in the sanctuary at 7:30 p.m. Their very own Sharon Wu, who was their rehearsal accompanist, is going to be here in Grand Rapids, and she's going to be doing a wonderful recital concert for all of us in this beautiful space and on the beautiful Steinway. And she will be performing masterworks from Bach to Beethoven to Chopin to Ravel and Rachmaninoff right here in the sanctuary at 7:30 p.m. I do hope that you'll be able to make it for that beautiful, beautiful evening of music. And welcome Sharon back.
You're next.
I'm next. The very next day, I do hope that you will be able to join us here again in the sanctuary for a memorial service for our dear friend Mary Lou Smith. It will be at 11 a.m. and we will have choir music will be sung in her honor, as well as all kinds of extravagant things you can imagine she requested in her service. So it should be a beautiful hour together at 11 a.m. next Saturday. Another thing will be in the flash about it as well.
So last week I preached on lament, and this week Reverend Christopher preached on peacemaking. And hopefully on Thursday you received this email about Together West Michigan, which is an organization that we as Fountain Street are members of. And I talked last week and commissioned our wonderful team for Together West Michigan as they are kicking off a house meeting campaign. I took time to explain last week what a house meeting is, and there's lots more info in this email if you haven't had a chance to look over it. But here's really what it boils down to this week for you. It is an invitation to lament. It is an invitation to participate in peacemaking right here in Grand Rapids. And if that's not enough reason to show up, your friends and peers are running these house meetings not only here within Fountain Street following service today, but also out in the wider world. And to be honest, they would love some friendly faces as they start this process. So directly following service, if you are interested in participating in a house meeting or learning more about what they look like, I invite you to come down here towards the front of the sanctuary, and we're going to have an open call for house meetings right here today. Meredith, would you raise your hand? Meredith's here. Ooh, Linda Jones is here. Tim Creamer's here. Are there any other Together West Michigan folks here? Okay, there's at least 3 of us here, and there's more online. But I invite you to come down to learn, because you have a story to tell. You, as a member of this community here at Fountain Street Church, and also as a member of the wider Grand Rapids community, your story matters, your neighbors matter, this community matters, and this is an opportunity to engage actively in that practice. So please, please take advantage. If you can't join us here in person today, there are other options. Again, they're in this email, but there are some virtual house meetings coming up, some other in-person house meetings, or if you'd like to schedule one with your neighbors, your friends, your committee here at Fountain Street, your team, please reach out to the team and we will help make that happen. But I hope to see many of you down here up front directly following service. Thank you.
One of the biggest privileges in ministry, I think, is the personal connections we get to make with all of you. And over these last few weeks, I've been so humbled by the things that are being shared with me. People open up about cataclysmic things going on in their homes, from the loss of marriage to the loss of a loved one, any number of things, the loss of feeling like they have power and control in their lives or over their own health, any number of things. And I'm amazed at how often folks will say to me, but with everything going on in Ukraine, I shouldn't complain. Maybe you can relate. There's really nothing, I have it good. And I have gotten to the point now where I will say, actually, you holding the grief of this and you making peace with this is exactly what you can do for Ukraine or Palestine or Myanmar or the children in Florida and Texas. We can't actually get on a flight and go broker peace treaties in Europe. We cannot, or the Middle East. But we can start at home in our heart, we can start in our homes, and we can start in this church. And so my invitation before we do a special blessing this week is for all of you as we leave to think about peacemaking as starting with you where you can make peace. Sometimes it's just resting with the grief and the lament, as Reverend Greta Joe said, and sometimes it's actually actively engaging something that might feel contentious or difficult. But let that be your blessing this week as we go forth. I've asked Reverend Greta Joe to help me because I'm asking you to help me with our blessing this week. After each little vignette of a prayer that I have for each of you, Reverend Greta Joe will lift up her hand and say with you,
"Blessed are the peacemakers." Did you see that coming?
All right, will you join me in our shared peacemaking blessing, my friends? Going forth from this time of worship with one another, we commit ourselves to being peacemakers in our own lives, our own hearts, our own families, our own church, and our own communities, as well as nationally and internationally.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Going forth from this cathedral of love that we love so much, we commit ourselves to building relationships based on justice, equality, equity, and the full participation of all people as the only true basis for a peaceful society.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Going forth from this temple of peace that we cherish so much, we commit ourselves to forgoing and forgiving others when they do wrong against us, to not ignoring the real sources of conflict and violence, to not retaliate when attacked or criticized, and to resolving conflict in our own lives through the messy work of conflict transformation and peace making.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Going forth from this place, my friends, we commit ourselves to actively seeking justice, pursuing love with intention, and making peace with courage.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Friends, may you go in peace to make peace with the power of the love that we have for all of you and that you share with one another. Blessed be.